The invitation had arrived 3 weeks late, folded like a secret someone wanted me to find, but not too soon. I left it unopened for days. Maybe I already knew what it said. Maybe part of me hoped that, by ignoring it, the past would stay buried under all the paint, the quiet, and the years I spent pretending to be someone else. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. It doesn't die. It just waits until the night you drink too much wine and start wondering if the ghosts you ran from still remember your name. That was how I ended up in front of the mirror, wearing a navy dress that didn't belong to me, holding a small clutch that still smelled of another woman's perfume. The taxi driver asked where I was headed. I told him the truth, to a place I should have left in the grave. The Magnolia Heights Alumni Gala was exactly how I remembered it: loud, perfect, polished. Chandeliers hung like frozen constellations, soft jazz floated through the air, and every laugh sounded rehearsed. The hotel ballroom had been remodeled, but the faces hadn't changed. People were older, yes, but their eyes still measured you the same way: by success, by scandal, by scars. I slipped through the glass doors and instantly felt the temperature drop. My name wasn't on anyone's lips, but I saw the recognition. Whispers traveled faster than champagne. "Is that her?" someone murmured. "The younger one, the quiet one. The one who disappeared." I smiled, the kind of smile you give before you draw a gun. I didn't belong here, not anymore, maybe not ever. But that's the thing about ghosts: we visit the living when we have unfinished business. Then she appeared. Vanessa Horton, my sister, my mirror in another life. She was radiant, of course. She always was. A crimson gown that caught the light like fire, diamonds at her ears, confidence pouring off her in waves. She was surrounded by men in expensive suits and women who pretended not to envy her. When her gaze met mine, time slowed. She didn't flinch, she didn't even blink. She simply tilted her head, lifted her champagne glass, and smiled, that signature, calculated, perfect smile. Then she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's wonderful to see some faces still standing after 20 years. Laughter rippled across the room. Polite, hollow. Her words landed like a blade against the ribs. I could have walked out then, I should have, but I stayed. Maybe because running had become too familiar. Maybe because I wanted to see if she'd dare to come closer. She didn't. Of course she didn't. Vanessa never dirtied her hands when she could watch others do it for her. I drifted to the bar and ordered water. The bartender looked surprised, like sobriety was more shocking than sin. He asked, "You one of the speakers tonight?" I said, "Not exactly." Behind me, a group of investors whispered about charity funds and overseas projects. The Magnolia Legacy Trust. I'd read that name before. Not in business journals, but in restricted files buried deep within Ghost Viper's archives. My old world. The world I had burned to escape. The sound of clinking glasses pulled me back. Vanessa was across the room, posing for a photo with a senator. She looked untouchable, immortal. For a second, I saw the child she used to be, barefoot in the rain, laughing, chasing me through our mother's garden. But memory is a liar. That girl was gone long before the rain stopped. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was Riley Wu, lean, sharp-eyed, camera slung across his chest. "Hallie Horton," he said, half grinning. "Didn't expect to see you crawling out of exile." "I wasn't invited," I said. He raised a brow. "That's why you came, huh?" I didn't answer. He studied me, then leaned closer. "You hear the rumors about Vanessa's foundation? Offshore holdings, weird shipments? I don't read tabloids. Neither do I, but this isn't gossip. Something's off, real off." I wanted to tell him to drop it, to stop chasing shadows. But deep down, I knew Riley was usually right about monsters, and he just spotted one. I excused myself and slipped outside for air. The night smelled like sea salt and electricity. Rain clouds were gathering. The city lights reflected on wet pavement, painting the world in bruised colors. I leaned against a pillar and watched the reflections ripple. It had been years since I'd last seen Vanessa. Years since the mission that had ended with my discharge, my silence, and the file that should have never existed. A voice behind me said, "Still hiding behind art?" I turned. Vanessa. Alone. No entourage this time. Just her, standing under the golden light, perfect as ever. "I'm not hiding," I said. "Just painting different kinds of lies." Her smile faltered just for a moment. "You always were dramatic. And you always were predictable. Don't start, Hallie. Why not? You already did." We stood there, two statues carved from the same stone, cracks running in different directions. Finally she said, soft but sharp, "You should have stayed gone. Some things don't need to be fixed." I replied, "Neither do broken mirrors. They already show enough truth." She left without another word. The sound of her heels faded into the night, leaving behind the faint scent of jasmine and war. I didn't realize my hands were trembling until the cigarette fell. It rolled into a puddle and died there. I told myself it was just a reunion, just a night. But something in the air had shifted. And for the first time in years, I felt the old itch, the one that meant someone had already made their move. When I drove home, the rain followed me. The rain rode with me all the way north, tapping the windshield like a messenger too polite to pound. The highway unfurled in a long silver ribbon and my headlights swam through it, cutting a corridor where the world felt small enough to manage. By the time I reached the gravel road to the cabin, the storm had thinned to a hush. Pines leaned over the lane like watchmen who had seen too much to care. I killed the engine and listened. Night has a way of telling the truth when the day refuses. Crickets stitched their usual pattern. The creek below the hill threw its small voice into the dark. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. I stepped out and the air smelled of wet bark and iron. The porch boards gave their familiar creak under my weight, and something inside me loosened, like a tight knot remembering how to be rope again. The key stuck once, as it always did, then turned. I pushed the door open with my shoulder and reached for the lamp on the small table. Amber light spread across square feet of quiet. The cabin looked exactly as I had left it. A mug on the counter with one fingerprint inside the rim, a jar of brushes resting like surrendered weapons, a canvas on the easel with 3 strokes that had not decided what they wanted to be. Home, or the closest thing I allowed myself to have, that was when I saw the envelope. It lay just inside the door, aligned with the threshold as if whoever had placed it there had a tape measure for malice. No stamp, no address. Just my name on the front in a hand that pretended to be calm. The air felt cooler on my neck. I shut the door, locked it, and turned the deadbolt out of memory more than fear. I did not open it right away. I walked the circuit first. Habit, kitchen window, latch still set, back door, chain still across the brace. The small pane above the sink threw my reflection back at me, pale and damp, hair stuck at the temple. The camera dot on the frame winked its green promise. No motion alerts. No trips. Good, or someone better than my cameras had decided to be polite. I returned to the envelope and slid a palette knife under the flap. No thrill, no dread, just a cold readiness, the kind that comes when you already suspect how the sentence ends. A photograph slid into my hand. Glossy, old enough for the colors to have softened into memory. 2 girls on a stone step. One with hair like summer hay. One with a mouth that did not know how to smile for the camera. Vanessa had her arm thrown around my shoulders. I was leaning inward or away. It was hard to tell. The cut was precise. A single line from crown to hip. 2 halves that did not belong together anymore. On the back, someone had written with a felt tip. The ink had bled a little, like the letters wanted to escape the page. The past never forgets. Neither do I. I placed the photograph on the table and listened again. That is the first skill you learn in a life of secrets. Not how to shoot. Not how to lie, how to hear the quiet when it changes shape. The quiet had changed. My feet carried me to the bedroom without thinking. The portrait above the dresser hung straight. The chair beside the window had not moved. Shadows were where I left them. I crouched and reached for the bottom drawer, pulled it wide, then pressed my thumb against the back panel and lifted. The false bottom tilted up with a soft wooden sigh. The space was empty. No drive, no note, not even the small folded cloth I kept as decoy. Emptiness has its own weight. It settled in my chest, steady and undeniable. The drive was not a confession. I was never foolish enough to keep those. It was a pattern, redacted notes, shadows of names. A map of the way rot spreads when you feed it money and applause. I had always told myself keeping it was a safeguard against the past coming back with a lawyer in one hand and a news van in the other. Now it was gone. Now it was a threat with my name on it. I closed the drawer, set the false bottom back into its lip, and smoothed the wood with my palm. Then I stood and looked at the room as if it belonged to a stranger. When you do not know where a wound is, you test the whole body for pain. The lamps were too still. The air was too still. A person who knows what they are doing can enter without leaving a fingerprint and leave without stealing anything that can be insured. The theft is the message. The absence is the signature. I walked back to the kitchen and filled the kettle. The gas clicked twice and caught. I set a mug on the counter and watched steam begin to curl. The ordinary act steadied me. I did not need a gun, I needed my head. I turned on the small radio I kept above the stove. A late-hour program hummed in. A song about heartbreak written by someone who had never been in a room with a real one. I let it play. If anyone was listening, let them hear how boring I could be. My phone sat face down beside the mug. I did not touch it. I went to the small closet, reached behind coats that smelled of rain and road, and found the case I had hoped I would not open again. The latches still bit my fingers like old dogs. Inside lay a slim laptop, 2 drives, a coil of cable, and a black rectangle the size of a book that was not a book. The rectangle hummed when I pressed the recess switch. The hum was good. It meant the world had not gone entirely to entropy. I did not go downstairs to the basement tonight. I was not ready to turn the cabin into a war room again. Not yet. Sense before force. Patience before noise. I carried the case to the small table by the window and cleared space with the back of my hand. The photograph glided aside and came to rest against the lamp. I powered the laptop and watched a dark screen think. The kettle whistled. I poured the water over the tea bag and set the mug down where the heat would warm my fingers without scalding them. Then I opened a blank document and wrote only a date, a time, and one sentence. Entry 1. Home was entered in my absence. No visible break. Intent was signal, not property. I saved the file to a drive that did not exist to anyone but me. Then I locked the file behind a set of keys that lived in a place no one would ever look. You do not hide secrets in darkness. You hide them in daylight inside something no one cares about. I took the photograph once more and studied the line of the cut. Whoever did it had used a blade that did not chatter. Clean, deliberate. The handwriting on the back had a right slant, forward leaning without flourish. Either a person who had trained themselves to be neat or a person who did not trust their hands. I turned the photo to the front and looked at our faces. 2 girls who could not know how loudly the future would speak. My mouth lifted at the corner. Not a smile. A recognition. The child I had been would not have forgiven the woman I became. The woman I am would not forgive the child for how long she waited to leave. That is the balance of family. Debts paid in different currencies. I put the picture back in the envelope and slid it under the lamp. Then I walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped onto the small stoop. The rain had stopped. The night smelled rinsed and new. Somewhere down in the woods an owl spoke once, the kind of low sound that reminds you are not the only hunter awake. I stood there until the cold climbed my wrists. On the field below the porch the grass lay slick and black. My footprints from the afternoon had blurred to wet smudges. No other prints. Whoever had been here had not come across the field. They had used the road. They had used the front door. They had held the envelope just long enough to make sure I would be the one to find it. I went back inside and shut the door. I turned off the radio. The silence returned and took its chair beside me. I lifted the mug and drank slowly. The tea had gone bitter. I did not mind. Bitterness has an honesty that sugar ruins. I checked the clock. Past 2. I did not feel tired. I felt sharpened. The way a blade feels after an oil stone. I walked to the easel. The canvas waited with its 3 strokes and its stubborn refusal to confess what it wanted to be. I dipped the brush and drew a thin line of gold from upper left to lower right. Light cutting darkness. A map if you knew how to read it. A warning if you did not. The cabin held my breath and my heartbeat and nothing else. No footsteps on the porch. No car on the lane. No phone vibrating with the demand to choose a side. Not yet. I cleaned the brush, set it in the jar, and clicked the lamp off. The room fell into that half-soft gray that belongs only to late night and people who are not ready to sleep. I stood still and let the dark learn my outline again. Someone had crossed a line. They had done it without fear. That told me as much about them as any name could. In the old days, I would have called it in and let the machine grind. Tonight, I would begin differently. I walked to the bedroom and lay down fully dressed. The weight of the blanket pressed my shoulders into the mattress, and the ceiling watched me for a while. I did not close my eyes. I waited for the first hint of morning to lighten the window. When it came, thin as breath, I said a single sentence into the room. You wanted my attention, you have it. The day answered with birds. The cabin answered with its small ticking clock. I sat up and felt the purpose settle inside me like a new spine. I had gone to the gala to see if ghosts remembered me. The ghosts had written back. Part 1 was over. The game had begun. Morning came wrapped in fog thick enough to swallow the porch rail. I hadn't slept. My eyes felt like they had been sanded down, but the mind refuses to rest when it senses a hunt beginning. The kettle hissed again, the sound that keeps me tethered to something human. I watched the steam rise and thought about how it always vanishes before you realize you've been staring at it. The envelope still lay under the lamp, the paper warped slightly from the damp air. I turned it over, looking for fingerprints I knew I wouldn't find. Whoever had left it knew what they were doing. Every angle, every placement was deliberate. There was no rush in the act. They wanted me to see it exactly where I did. I sat at the small table and opened my sketchbook. My hands began to move on their own, tracing the cut from the photograph, the division down the center of 2 faces. When I lifted my pencil, the page looked like a wound. The art always knows before I do. Outside, the fog began to thin. A car passed far down the road, invisible but for the crunch of gravel. I turned on my laptop. The screen flickered, waited for a password that lived in muscle memory. I typed it, watched the old network awaken. 6 monitors in the basement below this cabin waited to breathe, but not yet. Not until I knew which direction the ghost was moving. I brewed another cup of tea, poured it into the same mug as last night, and drank it too hot. The burn reminded me I was still here. I opened my email. Nothing but junk and the quiet of a life I had tried to make ordinary. I closed it again. The photograph called me back. I slipped it from its envelope, held it to the light. The tear through our bodies was perfectly straight, like it had been guided by a ruler. That detail told me more than a signature could. A person who slices emotion that cleanly is either a surgeon or a professional who no longer believes in accidents. I knew 2 people with that kind of precision. One was dead. The other was supposed to be. The radio murmured soft jazz from the kitchen, trying to fill the space that fear usually takes. I let it. I walked outside. The grass was still slick from the rain. Each blade caught the light of morning like small knives. At the bottom of the steps, a tire mark curved into the road. It wasn't deep enough to belong to a truck, not wide enough for a delivery van. Compact. European. Expensive. Whoever had been here had not walked from the woods. They had arrived with purpose, not stealth. I crouched and touched the wet groove with my fingertips, still soft, within 6 hours. That meant while I was driving home from the gala, they were already here, walking my floor, breathing my air, deciding where to leave their message. I stood, looked out at the tree line, and felt the world shrink into clarity. They had chosen to stir the part of me I tried to kill. They wanted the operative, not the artist. They would get her. I went back inside and began to dismantle the safety I had built around myself. The locks came off. The false sense of normality peeled away. I opened the floor hatch and descended into the basement. Dust rose in small ghosts around my feet. I flipped the main switch. The monitors blinked to life one by one, painting the walls in blue. Lines of code shimmered, waiting for instruction. It felt like shaking hands with an old vice. I logged into the secure channel. Serpent Echo 9 online, I said quietly. Static answered. Then a voice familiar as my own heartbeat came through. Hallie, that you? Riley, I said. I need access to your archives, everything connected to Magnolia Legacy Trust, charities, shell companies, offshore transfers. He hesitated. You sure you want to dig there? They bite hard. They already did. He didn't ask what that meant. He had learned long ago that if I was calling, the storm was already moving. I'll send what I have, he said finally. Encrypted route, same as before. Make it clean, no traces. Hallie, whatever this is, don't go alone. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. That's the only way I ever go. The line went dead. I stared at the monitors as they filled with maps, financial trails, and names that looked familiar in a nauseating way. Vanessa's company logo appeared again and again, attached to layers of funding that made no logical sense. Money moved in circles too perfect to be honest. My pulse slowed the way it used to before a mission. Focus brings calm. Fear becomes detail. In one corner of the screen, a window blinked open, a tracking feed from the gala's souvenir bags. I had slipped a small RFID tag into mine, habit more than plan. Most signals were static local. One, however, moved across the map like a heartbeat gone rogue. Frankfurt, Dubai, Prague. That was not tourism. That was logistics. I zoomed in, ran the trace through an old database. The route matched shipments registered under a company called Haverstone Logistics, one of Vanessa's subsidiaries. The pieces began to align. Vanessa's philanthropy wasn't clean money trying to look good. It was dirty money trying to hide in plain sight. I leaned back in the chair. The photograph lay on the desk beside the keyboard. I looked at it again, at the tear, at the smiling faces divided by intention. The phone vibrated. A message with no number. Just one line, you're late, no signature. The monitors dimmed for a second, flickered, then stabilized. That was not the network. That was someone reminding me they were already inside. The old reflex whispered run. The older one said stay. I shut off the lights and let the blue glow fill the room. Every shadow looked like a memory waiting to wake. I placed the photograph under the keyboard where it could feel the heat of the machine and whispered to no one, all right. Let's see what you want me to remember. The screens hummed, a soft mechanical breathing that filled the basement. I stared at the blinking cursor waiting for command, at the flicker of light that made my reflection look like a stranger wearing my skin. The message, you're late, still glowed on the corner monitor. I traced the words with my eyes, letting their weight settle. Whoever sent it wasn't trying to frighten me. They were reminding me of an appointment I hadn't agreed to but could no longer refuse. I opened a secondary terminal, one buried under 3 layers of false directories, and ran a protocol that should have been retired with my name. The connection stitched itself across nodes, silent, careful. A minute later, a window appeared, black background, a single blinking dot in the center. Then text, thin and gray, "Welcome back, Ghost Viper." I exhaled. The world has a sick sense of humor. I typed without thinking, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You know who? Ellison." Pause. "We never left, neither did you." Static swarmed the audio feed, a hiss, then a voice I hadn't heard since the day I disappeared into civilian life. Rough, deliberate, each word as measured as a knife. "Hallie, you were supposed to burn it all. Why is it still breathing?" "Maybe because some things refuse to die," I said. "Leave it alone," he said. "That file isn't yours anymore." "It was never yours either." The line went dead. The monitors flashed once and returned to standby. My system had been traced, at least partially. They knew I was active again. That meant I had about 30 minutes before the signal backtracked to the cabin. I pulled the hardline, shut down the drives, and watched the screens bleed to black. The silence that followed was deep, not empty, but waiting. I packed the main laptop, one drive, and a portable jammer into the case. Everything else stayed behind. I would move before dawn. But first, I needed to see one more thing. I pulled up the photo one last time, ran a light over the back. Under the red ink, faint impressions pressed into the paper, marks left by the pen tip. I shaded them with graphite until words surfaced like ghosts through fog. Find what she sold. So it was her after all. Vanessa, or someone who wanted me to believe it was. The thought carried the same sting either way. I made coffee the old-fashioned way, boiled in a dented pot. The smell filled the room with memory. Missions before dawn, cold mornings in places without names, waiting for orders that never came. The bitterness steadied me. By the time the cup was empty, I had a plan. I needed access to records outside government hands. Riley's network could only go so far. For the rest, there was one person left who owed me. His name was Ethan Crane. Once a field analyst, now a corporate lawyer polishing other people's dirt until it gleamed. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. I still remembered the way he avoided my eyes the night everything fell apart. I would give him the chance to make it right or to prove he never would. I went upstairs, grabbed my jacket, and opened the door to a pale sunrise. The fog was gone. The world smelled washed, too clean. I locked the cabin behind me, though we both knew a lock means nothing to someone who already has the key. The road into town was quiet. Pines bowed over it like old priests whispering confessions. Halfway down the hill, I caught sight of a black SUV parked behind the tree line. No plates. Windows tinted dark enough to swallow faces. I didn't stop. I didn't look twice. If they were watching, they'd see what I wanted them to see, calm, predictable, small. I drove past, steady hands on the wheel, eyes on the curve ahead. At the diner near the junction, I pulled in. The waitress recognized me, called me by name, asked if I wanted the usual. I nodded. Her kindness was background noise. It didn't reach the part of me that was awake now. While she poured coffee, I took out my phone and typed a message in an encrypted app that had survived every digital purge. Need a favor. Meet me at noon, old station. Bring what you still have. No names, he'd understand. I watched the SUV roll past the diner window 10 minutes later. Slow, searching, my reflection in the glass smiled without moving its mouth. They thought they were ahead. They always did. The waitress brought pancakes I wouldn't eat and asked if I was all right. Just painting again, I said. That's good, she replied. People need beauty, I nodded. Sometimes beauty, the most dangerous thing there is. When she left, I slid a folded bill under the cup and walked out the back door. The alley smelled of grease and rain. A delivery truck rumbled by, covering my footsteps as I crossed to the next street where a rusted pickup waited. It wasn't mine, but the key sat in the visor. Rural kindness. I'd return it later if I could. The drive to the old station took an hour. It used to be a field office before Ghost Viper went underground. Now it was a shell of concrete and silence, vines climbing the walls like veins. I parked behind the building, killed the engine, and listened. The air felt empty, safe enough. Inside, dust floated through shafts of light. The desks were gone, but the outline of their legs still marked the floor. I sat on the cold metal bench and waited. Ethan arrived late as always. A dark coat, cautious steps, the kind of expensive shoes that don't belong in places like this. When he saw me, he stopped a few feet away. Hallie, he said, you look the same. You don't, I said. He gave a dry laugh. 5 years does that. What's this about? You used to work for them, Magnolia Legacy, Vanessa's trust. I need access to the shipping manifests. He looked past me toward the cracked window. You shouldn't be digging into this. It's not just her anymore. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. He hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. This is all I could get before they started cleaning servers. If anyone traces it, it never came from me. I took it. The metal was warm from his hand. They'll come after you, he said. They already have, I replied. He studied me a moment longer. You always said you wanted to disappear. Why not let yourself? Because they came to my door, I said, and left me an invitation. Ethan looked tired, older than I remembered. You won't like what you find, Hallie. Some ghosts wear your uniform, I smiled. Then it's a reunion. He left first. I watched him walk to his car, the careful steps of a man who knows every shadow hides a listener. When the sound of the engine faded, I plugged the drive into my laptop. Folders bloomed across the screen. Files named with dates and codes, shipments, transfers. And one directory marked with 3 letters I hadn't seen in years. GV9, the Ghost Viper Archive. My old life staring back, I clicked it open. Documents scrolled by, memos signed by names I thought buried, and at the bottom a single classified report stamped with Ellison's authorization. Subject, Hallie Horton. Status, terminated for breach of national security. Threat level, active. Under it a photo, my photo, taken yesterday at the Gala. The basement air seemed to thin even though I was miles away. I shut the laptop, heart steady but loud in my chest. They had been watching me long before I returned. I looked at the flash drive, at my reflection in its metal surface, and whispered to the empty room, all right, you want me back. Let's play. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering dust through the doorway like the beginning of a storm. The drive back from the station felt longer than it should have. The road twisted through forest and fog until even the compass app began to hesitate. I let the silence ride with me. I needed to hear the small noises, the tires over gravel, the engine breathing, the whisper of leaves brushing metal. They were the only sounds left that did not lie. By the time I reached the cabin, the day had folded itself into evening. The clouds sat low and heavy, a gray ceiling pressing down. I parked under the trees instead of the usual spot. If they were watching, they would have to look harder. Inside, the air was stale. I didn't turn on the main light, just a single lamp by the desk. The photograph still waited where I'd left it, that perfect wound cutting through 2 faces. I slid it aside and powered up the system again. The drive spun awake with the small whine of reluctant soldiers. The flash drive from Ethan sat in my palm, its weight wrong for its size. I hesitated before slotting it in. The machine hesitated too, a pause long enough to suggest it already knew what kind of trouble it was swallowing. The screen filled with directories, mirrored to a ghost server hidden somewhere overseas. I opened one at random. Inside were coordinates, routes, and strings of letters that only made sense to people who had once traded secrets for sleep. In the top right corner of the screen, the surveillance feed flickered to life. 6 black and white panels showing 6 different angles of the cabin exterior. No movement, no lights beyond my own. For now, the world was still pretending to be safe. I ran the file parser and waited. Rows of numbers streamed down. Cargo weights, destinations, transfer approvals. I had read enough manifests in my life to know these weren't ordinary shipments. One in particular caught my attention. Lot 47B, Heritage Artwork Transfer, Savannah Museum. The origin tag read Magnolia Legacy Trust. The destination was blank. The manifest was signed by someone who no longer existed. Me. I leaned back, stared at my own signature looping across the digital page. My pulse did not quicken. There are moments when shock is too heavy to move the blood. Someone was using my identity to move something through the art world. Art shipments were perfect cover, no customs inspection, ensured anonymity, and everyone too polite to ask what a masterpiece was worth in uranium. I followed the line of code linked to the manifest. It opened a second map, a layered lattice of coordinates that formed a pattern I almost recognized. I tilted my head, let my eyes defocus, and there it was. The geometry was familiar because I had painted it. 3 years ago, under a different name, I'd held a small exhibition in Paris. One of those abstract pieces, The Weight of Silence, had been bought by a collector I never met. I had used the brushstrokes to encode a routing network, a habit from the old days, a way to practice without purpose. Somehow they had taken that map and turned it into a real trade route. My art had become a blueprint for crime. The realization came without drama, just a quiet sinking. Guilt is never loud. It whispers, small and efficient. I opened a secure comm line to Riley, static then his voice. Tell me you're somewhere public. I'm home, I said. Not good enough. Someone been ghosting your IP for hours. They're bouncing signals through 3 continents. I know, it's Ellison. Christ, Hallie, you sure? He called me by my old name. Riley exhaled hard. Then you're in deeper than I thought. I pulled data on Magnolia's shipments. There's a warehouse listed under a shell in Savannah, private security, unmarked vehicles, and guess what? They all have diplomatic clearance. That's where they're moving the lot labeled heritage artwork. That's the one. When's the next shipment? Tomorrow night, midnight. I'll be there. Hallie, don't. You can't just walk into that place. These people, they're my people, I said and killed the call. The room went quiet again. I could hear the slow tick of the clock, the faint hum of circuits cooling. I turned back to the map, traced the coordinates with my fingertip. The pattern curved like a serpent swallowing its tail. Ghost Viper's emblem. Of course. They had left their signature inside the code, a message for those who knew how to see it. A window popped open on the lower monitor, an automatic ping from the data vault I'd connected earlier. The system had found a match. A name, Vanessa Horton, attached to a corporate authorization signed by Director Ellison C. Ward. Date stamped 6 months after my supposed termination. That was the first time I let myself feel anger. Not the hot kind, the useful kind, the kind that sharpens decisions. They had built an empire on my ashes. I opened a new directory, labeled it Echo, and began pulling copies of every file that carried either of their names. Each transfer ticked upward like a heartbeat. When the progress bar hit 70%, the lights in the cabin flickered. A low hum crawled through the speakers. Someone was tracing me again, cutting through firewalls like silk. I yanked the drive, killed the connection. The screens went black. Only the hum remained, faint then gone. I waited, still as a drawn bow. Outside, something shifted. A branch snapping, a footstep. I moved to the window, careful not to show silhouette against the lamp. The night was thick. But on the gravel road beyond the trees, 2 small lights blinked once, then twice, then vanished. A signal. Old Ghost Viper protocol. Stand by, target in play. They were here. I checked the pistol hidden under the drawer. Still clean, still loaded. I hadn't touched it in years. It felt heavier now, like memory given metal form. I slid it into my jacket and turned off the lamp. In darkness, the cabin became a map of its own. Every piece of furniture a landmark, every creak of the floor a warning. I crossed to the far side, opened the small door behind the bookcase, and slipped into the crawl space that led to the back exit. Cold earth under my palms, the smell of dust and wood rot. When I emerged at the tree line, I saw the SUV again, the same one from before. Parked half-hidden, engine running, headlights off. A man stood beside it, tall, shoulders squared, face shadowed by the brim of a cap. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at me. The wind moved between us, carrying the faint metallic scent of rain and oil. He raised one hand, slow, deliberate, not a threat, a warning. Then he got back in the vehicle and drove away without headlights. I waited until the sound faded before moving. Back inside, the monitors blinked alive again by themselves. Every screen showed the same image now, a single line of text in white against black. Tomorrow midnight. Savannah. Come alone. Below it, a signature appeared and vanished so fast I almost doubted I'd seen it. I stared at the dark monitors until my reflection became clearer than the text. My own face, tired but set. If Vanessa wanted me to come alone, it meant one thing. She was confident. And when my sister was confident, people bled. I shut down the power and stood in the dark until my eyes adjusted. The room felt smaller now, filled with the echo of old commands, old ghosts. I whispered into the still air, "You want the past, Vanessa? I'll bring it with me." The clock upstairs struck 12. Midnight already. The beginning of the next day, the next move. I didn't sleep. I spent the remaining hours sketching the map from memory, tracing the serpent until dawn turned the sky pale. Each line steadied my hand. Each curve whispered a name I thought I'd forgotten. Ghost Viper was awake again, and so was I. Dawn came gray and wet, a thin mist curling around the pines like smoke from a candle too small to light the room. I didn't move immediately. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the cabin, staring at the sketches I had made overnight. The serpent pattern of the shipments, encoded in brushstrokes, made sense now. The curves, the angles, the gaps, all precise. Whoever had moved the artwork had used my own design as a blueprint. My art had become a roadmap for crime. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, watched the steam rise, and let the first real thought of the day settle. I needed to go to Savannah. Midnight was too close to ignore. I packed lightly. The laptop, encrypted drives, a pistol, the sketchbook. No one could see what I carried, nothing visible, nothing traceable. Everything else stayed behind. The cabin would remain silent, or at least quiet enough to fool casual eyes. Riley's message came as a ping, "You there?" I typed back, alive, moving pieces. He replied instantly, "Be careful." They are expecting someone. I ignored the warning. They always did. Expectation is the easiest weakness to exploit. The drive south was uneventful, gray highway, occasional fog patches swallowing everything beyond headlights. I kept the laptop beside me, reviewing the Savannah manifests, rechecking the routes. Every shipment was timed to the minute, every transfer signed by a name I knew well, Vanessa Horton, and authorized by Ellison, my former commander. I clenched the steering wheel. They had built their empire on my name and my training. They had moved through my maps, used my lessons, and assumed I had vanished. But that was a mistake. I stopped a few miles from the city, checking the mirrors, listening to the faint hum of the SUV behind me. Nothing. I had set a trail, a breadcrumb of digital fingerprints meant to be noticed. Whoever was watching would know I was onto them, and that knowledge would make them reckless. Perfect. I parked in an alley near the warehouse district. The building that held the next shipment was old, concrete walls, security cameras that covered the front entrance but not the sides, perfect blind spots. I slipped out of the car, crouched, and moved along the shadows, every step measured. The hum of the city behind me faded, leaving only my breath and the faint sound of water dripping from the eaves. I stopped at a side door. A small keypad blinked. Not uncommon for warehouses, but the numbers were scrambled, a pattern only someone trained in fieldcraft could decipher. I keyed in the code I had memorized from the sketches and manifest cross-reference. The lock clicked. I slipped inside. The interior smelled of varnish, dust, and the faint tang of money. Crates lined the walls, some labeled fragile heritage artwork, others blank. Security cameras were present, but the angle of the sun and the way I entered kept me out of their view. I traced the room, scanning every crate. One stood out. Slightly misaligned, heavier than the rest. It had my signature engraved in invisible ink on the transport papers, proof that this crate had been routed using my encoded pattern. I knelt, ran a scanner over the markings. Data appeared on my laptop. Coordinates, transfer schedules, shipment logs, all accurate, all maliciously clean. The serpent had moved and I was tracing its head. A shadow moved near the far wall. I froze, slow inhale. Nothing. Then another movement, not random, deliberate. I ducked behind a crate, letting the data feed continue uninterrupted. Through the laptop, I sent a ping to Riley. They are here. I need eyes outside. Seconds later, his voice crackled softly in my earpiece. Hallie, hold position. Backup is on the way. Don't engage until you confirm targets. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Patience is a weapon. I had learned that in a life where one false move means death. I traced the flow of the crates, seeing where each would go after Savannah, and realized the operation was bigger than I had imagined. Vanessa was not acting alone. Ellison had set it in motion, long before anyone thought I would come back. The faint sound of a door closing upstairs. Footsteps. 2 sets. My pulse slowed into a rhythm I had known in the field. Observation before action. The enemy didn't know I knew where they were. That was my advantage. I tapped into the local network, sending false signals that made it appear someone else was in the warehouse. Cameras adjusted, guards shifted, and the movement slowed, confused. Perfect. They thought they had the upper hand. Then I saw her. Vanessa. Across the room, checking the crates herself, confident, unaware that I had already anticipated every step. Her gaze caught mine, and for the first time in years, she looked unsettled. Not fear, not yet, just the faintest recognition that the chessboard had changed. I moved closer, silent, blending into shadows. The coordinates of the crates, the timing of the shipment, the encoded map in my sketchbook, it all converged. I could stop the shipment tonight, expose the network, and draw out the players who had betrayed me. The screens of my laptop flickered with warnings, encrypted messages I hadn't expected. Someone else had anticipated my move, feeding signals into the system. My breath evened. Someone was playing their own game, and that was fine. I had 2 goals: protect the evidence and make sure the serpent never finished its curve. I adjusted my position behind a stack of crates. The hum of the building, the faint shift of paper and dust, the rhythm of my heartbeat, they all became a map I could read. The countdown had begun. The city smelled different at night, a mixture of wet asphalt, diesel, and distant exhaust. Savannah had a rhythm I had never learned to follow, but tonight I let it guide me. Every turn of the wheel, every stop at a red light was deliberate. I was aware of the way shadows clung to buildings, the way streetlights pooled in the cracked pavement. I was looking for patterns, and tonight I needed none of them to slip past me. The gallery was small, tucked between a row of old brick storefronts. Inside, it smelled of turpentine, varnish, and dust that clung to decades of exhibitions past. The space itself was perfect. White walls, minimalist lighting, and nothing to distract the casual observer. It looked like the kind of gallery that invited pretentious whispers about brushstrokes, not the kind that hid coded manifests and encrypted maps inside a canvas. I carried the crate with care. It bore the Heritage Artwork label, but that was a lie I intended everyone to believe. I placed it in the corner of the room, positioning it so that the air vents would carry its faint hum toward the main hall. Every step, every adjustment was meticulous. Patterns embedded in the crate, in the brushwork, in the placement of security cameras, all designed to manipulate who saw what and when. I switched on my laptop and accessed the manifest. Coordinates, shipping times, and encoded messages flowed across the screen. I traced the path of the lot through Savannah, through customs, through warehouses. Each line of code intersected with brushstrokes from my Paris exhibition years ago. My art was never just art. It had always been a code, a practice, a map for those who could read it. Tonight it was a trap. The gallery doors opened, faint creak, and I wasn't surprised. Grace Ellis walked in first. I had anticipated her. The collector, the one who had pretended to see beauty but only ever counted value. She moved slowly, eyes scanning every painting, notebook in hand. My hand itched for the small scanner I had hidden beneath the table, a device that would reveal her attempts to access the data embedded in the artwork. Riley had positioned himself outside the building, ready to monitor the network. Through the earpiece, his voice was calm, but there was tension underneath. "Hallie, they're moving in. Cameras show at least 3 figures outside approaching the north entrance. You've got company." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Patience, I reminded myself. Every movement was a message, every brushstroke a lure. The first 2 people in the gallery were the bait, the rest would follow. A faint click, footsteps on the creaking hardwood. I froze mid-step, letting the shadows swallow me. Vanessa entered next, confidence radiating from her posture. She wore her signature red silk, and I noticed the small emblem on her bracelet, a subtle nod to the Legacy Trust. She scanned the room casually, yet deliberately, unaware that every eye, every camera, every data point had already been anticipated. I let her move closer to the central painting. The Weight of Silence. The title alone was enough to draw attention, but the brushwork concealed the real secret. Coordinates, codes, shipment routes, all hidden under layers of color and texture. Vanessa ran her fingers along the frame, reading the painting as though she could decipher my intentions. She thought she could. I tapped my earpiece. "Riley, confirm the digital trace. Any intrusion detected?" A pause, then. "Someone is inside the network, accessing manifests, not your people." I smiled, cold, measured. The game had begun. Vanessa lifted a glass from a nearby table, swirling the wine as she glanced at Grace and the other collectors. The motion was casual, but I saw the tension beneath the surface. She was testing, probing. Anyone in her position would, and anyone in her position would underestimate me. I adjusted the crate slightly. Hidden sensors inside it had already begun transmitting the encoded data to a secure server, sending copies to Riley and myself. Vanessa didn't know it yet, but every move she made inside the gallery was being recorded, traced, and analyzed. Her empire, built on deception, had walked straight into my canvas. A faint cough. I turned slightly. One of the guards, a man I had noted in the manifests, was positioned near the main entrance. He had not noticed the signal I planted, nor the small vibration under his feet that I had calibrated. Every step he took fed the map, and every map revealed a little more of the path he thought he controlled. Vanessa leaned in toward Grace, whispering something. The words didn't matter. The gesture was what I was waiting for, greed and confidence in a single movement. I recorded it, I encoded it, and I let the surveillance cameras catch it all. The night was still young. The gallery quiet. And yet the first move had been made. Every pattern, every curve, every brushstroke of the painting had been set. This was more than an exhibition. It was a message, a trap, and a warning all at once. I stepped back, letting the shadows take me, and watched them dance around the room. Vanessa thought she was in control. She thought she had predicted me. She had not. And when the last piece moved into place, the trap would spring. I stayed hidden in the shadows as Vanessa and her entourage moved through the gallery. Every gesture, every glance, every tilt of her head fed the network I had secretly embedded. My heart didn't race. I didn't need adrenaline tonight. The trap was already in motion. I was merely the observer, the conductor of a symphony that only I could hear. The painting at the center of the room, The Weight of Silence, hummed faintly with the hidden sensors I had embedded beneath the canvas. The brushstrokes, layered in oil and pigment, were more than art. They were a code, a network map, and a digital fingerprint. Each curve represented a shipment, a route, a hidden ledger entry. Vanessa had no idea that the art she admired had been tracking her movements, cataloging her empire stroke by stroke. Grace moved closer, notebook in hand, pretending to jot notes while her eyes darted to the hidden crates. Vanessa followed her gaze, adjusting her posture, exuding confidence. I watched carefully. The patterns were predictable. Greed and self-assurance made people predictable, and predictable people are the easiest to map. I accessed the network from my hidden terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as Riley confirmed the connection. "Hallie," he whispered through the earpiece, "we've got at least 4 active access points, all coming from inside the gallery. They've started cross-referencing the manifests. Someone knows what they're doing." "Good," I replied softly. "Let them play. Let them reveal themselves." I moved closer to the painting, careful to remain unseen, adjusting the sensors and scanners I had placed beneath the frame. The moment the brushstrokes were scanned, the encoded message would trigger a cascade of alerts across the network I controlled. Each intruder's move would be tracked, recorded, and logged. Each attempt to manipulate the shipment routes would leave a digital footprint they couldn't erase. Vanessa raised her glass toward Grace and spoke in a low voice. The words were clipped, polite, but I didn't need to hear them. The intention behind the gesture was enough. She thought she was orchestrating this night, controlling the room. She was wrong. I shifted slightly, scanning the faces of the collectors and guards, noting each one's reactions. A faint tension was beginning to ripple through the room. The subtle shift in posture, the quick glance, the hesitated gesture, these were all small tremors that indicated the first cracks in their composure. Riley's voice came again, steady but urgent. "Hallie, the signal from the crate just pinged the server. They've scanned the painting. It's live, everything is feeding back to us." I allowed a small smile. The trap was taking hold. Each movement by Vanessa or her team activated hidden sensors and cameras. Each gesture, each calculated motion, each confident step was now a recorded piece of evidence I could use against them. The guards shifted, uneasy. Vanessa's composure remained intact, but I saw the faintest furrow in her brow. My heart was calm, steady. This was not fear, it was calculation. She was measuring, adjusting, and I was measuring her measurement. I moved to a shadow near the back wall, making sure to remain out of sight, and activated the secondary feed. Every camera in the gallery was now connected to my network, every movement logged and timestamped. The room was mine without anyone knowing it. Vanessa approached the central crate, her eyes scanning the surface. The sensors beneath it had already recorded every interaction, every subtle pressure, every tilt. Her empire, built on precision and secrecy, was being mapped stroke by stroke. I allowed myself a quiet thought, pride, not for what I had done, but for what was about to happen. They had underestimated me, thinking I was a civilian, a ghost, a woman who had disappeared. They had forgotten the training, the instincts, the patience that had kept me alive. The first alarm blinked on my terminal. A guard had attempted to access the hidden crate. The sensors had recorded him instantly. His movements were logged, time-stamped, and traced. The network I had built began to feed the data to Riley in real time. Vanessa noticed a slight hesitation among the guards. She looked around, instinctively sensing that something was off. Her eyes met mine from across the room for the briefest instant, and I saw recognition. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. She knew I was here in some form, somewhere, controlling the game. I did not move. I let the moment linger. Every second counted. Patience was a weapon far sharper than a gun. Another alert. Grace Ellis had taken a photo of the painting. The embedded data had activated instantly, sending copies to my secure server. Every attempt to extract information was now a breadcrumb I could follow. Every step they took was recorded, cataloged, and stored. Vanessa's confidence wavered, not visibly, but subtly. Her gestures became more controlled, calculated. She was beginning to realize that the room, the gallery, the very night she thought she had orchestrated, was no longer hers. I leaned against the far wall, invisible in the shadows, and allowed myself a quiet acknowledgement of the irony. The art, the painting she admired, was the very trap that would unravel everything. Every shipment, every code, every move she had made was now part of a story she did not control. The gallery was silent except for the soft hum of my equipment and the faint shuffle of feet. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the anticipation build. The first countermeasure had been triggered. The trap was set, and Vanessa Horton had no idea she was the bait. I whispered to myself, soft enough that only the darkness could hear, "Let's see how confident you really are." The drive back from Savannah was quieter than the night itself. The hum of the tires on wet asphalt, the faint scent of rain in the air, the soft glow of streetlights, all of it felt like a buffer between the chaos I had set in motion and the storm I was about to step into. I kept the laptop open beside me, watching the data feed scroll in real time. Every photo taken, every sensor ping from the gallery, every movement logged and timestamped, it was all mine now. The trap had worked. Now the question was how deep the rabbit hole really went. I thought about Vanessa, her poised movements, the way she'd adjusted the wine glass in her hand, the subtle calculation behind every smile she gave Grace. Confidence is easy to fake. Control is not. And tonight, she was beginning to understand that someone else had been running the strings. I called Ethan Crane. He answered after the third ring. His voice was low, cautious, as if he expected the line to be tapped. "I have what you need," I said. "Meet me, now." "I'll be there in 20, he replied, and hung up before I could ask if he'd brought the backup I was hoping for. The cabin had always been a staging ground, a place where plans were drawn and executed in silence. Tonight, I wasn't staying. The road to Savannah wasn't long, but time had compressed. Every minute mattered. I packed the drives, checked the pistol, and made sure the sketchbook containing encoded coordinates was secure in the inner pocket of my jacket. The diner near the junction was deserted except for a lone cook finishing up breakfast prep. I slipped in through the back door, ignoring the smell of frying bacon. Ethan was already there, standing by the corner booth, jacket tight against the early morning chill. He looked older than I remembered, the kind of wear that comes from playing both sides and never being fully clean. "You have everything?" I asked. "I have what I could get," he said. "And a warning, whoever set this up, they didn't just plan for Vanessa, they planned for you." I nodded. "I know." He slid a folder across the table. Envelopes thick with documents, memos, spreadsheets, some marked confidential, others stamped with codes I recognized. My pulse steadied as I skimmed them. Evidence of financial transfers, shipping routes, and a chain of command linking back to Ghost Viper itself. Ethan exhaled. "They've covered their tracks too well for law enforcement to touch, but you can expose it." "I'm not exposing it yet," I said. "I'm tracing it, step by step." The drive back toward the city was deliberate. Every intersection, every overpass, every camera feed I avoided with careful calculation. I knew they were watching. I knew that whoever had sent the message from Savannah was already tracking my moves. But anticipation is a weapon. They had no idea I had anticipated their anticipation. When I arrived at a secluded safe house near the docks, I spread the documents across the table. The manifests aligned with the encoded paintings. Patterns emerged in the shipments. Money was moving along the same path as my brushstrokes. Every line I had drawn years ago was now mirrored in real-world logistics. I sent a secure ping to Riley, updating him with the decrypted patterns. "Hallie," he said, tension clear in his voice, "there's more than just Vanessa. Ellison, he authorized the shipments, coordinated the transfers. He's not just involved, he's the architect." I paused. Ellison, my former commander, the one I had trusted, the one who had marked me as terminated, left me for dead in the files, erased my existence. My stomach tightened. Betrayal had a way of sinking quietly, like a stone into a river. "I need him," I said quietly. "Direct contact, no intermediaries." "You're walking into a trap," Riley said. "I'm already inside it," I replied. The first layer of the network was unraveling before my eyes. Vanessa was just the surface. The deeper truth lay with those who had hidden behind her, using her as a shield while moving the pieces I had once controlled. And now I had to reclaim them step by step, before they realized I had not only returned but was several moves ahead. I arranged the files, tagged the patterns, and marked the coordinates for my next move. Midnight in Savannah was not the end. It was the beginning of the counterstrike. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the laptop and the distant murmur of ships in the harbor. I stood, took a deep breath, and whispered almost to myself, "Let's see who survives the wake of their own empire." Night fell fast, and the harbor lights reflected off the water like scattered gold. I had set up in the safe house with the manifests, encrypted drives, and my laptop connected to a secure proxy. Every step Vanessa's network had taken, every shipment she orchestrated, was now mapped and mirrored on my screens. I sent a signal to Ethan, a single ping through a channel only he would recognize. He arrived 15 minutes later, quiet as a shadow. He carried a small encrypted drive, the kind only someone with legal clearance and a conscience could smuggle without leaving a trace. "Hallie," he said softly, laying the drive on the table. "You should know there's more than just financial trails. The chain leads back to Ellison. He signed the orders himself, time-stamped after your termination. Whoever is behind this has been using your name, your patterns, everything you left behind. I nodded, scanning the contents. There it was, the network, the coded maps, the same brushstroke patterns embedded in shipments across 3 continents. I had designed them years ago as practice, never imagining they'd be weaponized by someone I trusted. They're waiting for me to react, I said. Every move is meant to trigger a trap, but I already know the rhythm. Ethan studied me for a long moment. You think you can take it apart from the inside? I don't think, I said. I will. I initiated a live feed from Savannah, monitoring the warehouse operations. Guards moved in predictable patterns. Vanessa's team checked crates, scanned labels, and rotated shipments as the manifests dictated. Each action fed into the digital echo I had created. The network didn't know I was tracing it in real time. That gave me an advantage, knowledge. Knowledge is power, and tonight, it was my weapon. Riley's voice crackled in my earpiece. Hallie, we've got movement outside. Surveillance picked up 2 SUVs circling the block. Good, I replied. Let them come closer. Visibility is control. I opened the encrypted drive Ethan had brought and cross-referenced it with the patterns from my own sketches. Each brushstroke, each curve matched the shipment logs. I realized something else, a secondary pattern embedded within the first. Someone had added it months ago. I squinted at the data. Ellison. He hadn't just signed the orders, he had anticipated my moves, leaving a breadcrumb trail to monitor me. The betrayal hit differently this time. Vanessa was the lure. Ellison was the hand behind the trap. My pulse tightened, but my mind was clear. I had been trained for this. Anticipation, observation, calculated action. I called Ethan. I need direct access to Ellison. No intermediaries, arrange a meeting. Now. Hallie, that's dangerous, he said. I know, that's why I'm asking. He hesitated, then nodded. Done, but be careful, he's not just watching, he's orchestrating. I turned back to the screens. The warehouse operation was a flowing map now, every movement logged. The shipment that Vanessa had overseen was moving toward midnight clearance. I mapped my own countermeasures, signals to Riley, triggers in the painting, adjustments to sensor placement in the crates. Each step calculated to force them into a corner they hadn't anticipated. Then a subtle alert blinked on my terminal. A ghost signal within the network traced to Ellison's location. He was aware I had recovered the Ghost Viper archives. He knew I was alive in more than name. I allowed myself a small smile. Perfect. Now the game truly begins. I leaned back, took a slow breath, and whispered to the empty room, Ellison, let's see if you can keep up with your own mistakes. The clock struck 11. Midnight in Savannah was approaching. Every calculation, every encoded pattern, every brushstroke and movement would converge in less than an hour. I closed the laptop for a moment and touched the painting's edge. The weight of the past, the betrayal, and the trap all settled in my palm. It was almost time. The night of the gala arrived like a storm trapped behind glass. Magnolia white gala. Every detail screamed perfection. Chandeliers hung like frozen suns, carpets soft enough to swallow footsteps, and guests polished to the point of glare. I stepped out of the car in a simple black dress, understated enough to blend in, but tailored in a way that spoke confidence. Every movement calculated, every glance measured. I could see Vanessa immediately. She had already begun her performance, greeting patrons with that radiant, effortless smile. Her confidence was armor, and she wore it like it was woven from light itself. People followed her lead, awed, obedient, as if the room had no other center but her. But I had other plans. I slipped past the photographers and the hosts, blending into the shadows near the balcony overlooking the main hall. My laptop, disguised in a slim clutch, was connected to the building's network. Every security camera, every motion sensor, every digital footprint Vanessa thought she controlled, I could see. Riley's voice came through the earpiece, low and calm. Hallie, you're live. I've mirrored every feed. The network is yours. Good, I whispered. Keep it that way. I watched Vanessa approach the stage to give her speech, her voice flowing like honey over steel. She was introducing the charity awards, oblivious that the screens behind her were about to tell a different story. I activated the sequence. The gallery sensors had already transmitted encoded images to my secure server. Now, the manifests, the shipment logs, financial transfers, every recorded interaction from Savannah streamed to the main screen behind Vanessa. The monitors flickered once, then began displaying documents in real time. The crowd froze. Cameras flashed. Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa turned, eyes widening as the first evidence scrolled across the screens. A shipment marked under heritage artwork traveled through her own network of warehouses, every signature matching the encoded pattern I had extracted from the painting. Every lie she had carefully constructed began to unravel on live display. I moved closer, unseen in the crowd, my heels silent on the marble. My hand stayed steady at my sides. The pistol under my clutch remained untouched. This was a war of intelligence, not bullets. Riley whispered through the earpiece, "They've noticed the feed. Security is scrambling, but the data can't be stopped now." Vanessa's expression changed, the polished mask slipping ever so slightly. She looked toward the audience, searching for some ally, some signal, some escape from the truth pouring behind her. I didn't move. I let her panic, let the dominoes fall. A server feed displayed email exchanges linking Vanessa directly to offshore accounts. Another showed shipping manifests of crates moving internationally, traceable only to her network. The room buzzed with tension, whispers growing into murmurs, murmurs into questions, questions into realization. And then Vanessa's eyes found mine. Her confidence had vanished in a single moment. She understood. Not fully, not yet, but enough. The trap I had laid, the careful orchestration of evidence, art, and timing, had stripped away the armor she had always worn. I whispered to myself, "It's over. Not for her, but for the story she thought she controlled." The first move was mine. Public exposure had begun. The next steps, the final revelations, were only moments away. The crowd's murmur grew into a ripple of shock, whispers cutting through the room like sharp glass. Cameras flashed, capturing Vanessa's expressions, every flicker of panic and disbelief. The polished mask she had spent decades perfecting was cracking, revealing a woman who realized too late that her world was built on fragile lies. I stepped from the shadows, my heels silent on the marble floor. The laptop in my clutch transmitted the last of the encrypted data, each file a dagger pointing to every deception she had woven into her empire. The heritage artwork shipments, the offshore accounts, the manipulated manifests, it all streamed in real time across the massive screens behind her. Vanessa turned sharply, eyes locking with mine. Her lips parted, a wordless gasp. Recognition. Fear. Something that looked almost like anger. She realized that I had not only anticipated her moves, I had controlled the narrative, orchestrating the exposure with precision. I walked toward the stage, every step deliberate, measured, calm. Cameras caught me, but I did not care. The audience's attention was already divided between the unfolding evidence and the woman who had once ruled the room with effortless authority. Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos, polished, controlled, trying to reclaim some semblance of command. "This is preposterous. Fabrications. Lies." I stopped a few feet from the stage, looking directly at her. "Not lies," I said quietly. "Truth, the only thing you never learned to control." Her eyes narrowed, scanning for allies, for support, for some sign that she wasn't alone. But everyone in the room could see the evidence. The web she had spun to protect herself had become the rope tightening around her own neck. Riley's voice came through my earpiece. "They're trying to shut the network down. Security is moving in." "Let them," I whispered. "It's too late now." The screens flashed with more data. Emails between Vanessa and Ellison. Manifests stamped with dates and signatures I had memorized years ago. Crates of artwork, coded brushstrokes, shipment logs, every link leading back to her. The audience shifted, murmurs growing louder. Cameras rolled, broadcasting the unraveling in real time. Vanessa's posture faltered. She attempted to regain composure, but the moment was gone. She looked to the side, eyes darting, realizing that the trap had been in motion long before she arrived. The gallery, the gala, the shipments, the art, every detail had been anticipated. I leaned slightly toward her, voice low, controlled, carrying only enough weight for her to hear. "You thought you controlled everything, but you underestimated the one person who never forgot." Her hands trembled slightly on the podium. A bead of sweat traced down her temple. The room was silent for a heartbeat, the tension almost tangible, as if the air itself held its breath. Then came the last piece, the hidden feed from the painting in Savannah transmitted live. The encoded maps, the financial logs, the routes of illicit shipments, they appeared on every screen simultaneously. The audience gasped collectively, a single wave of realization. Vanessa's empire, built on secrecy and manipulation, lay exposed for all to see. She looked at me, voice barely audible. "You think you've won?" I shook my head slightly, a smile ghosting my lips. "I haven't won yet." But the truth always catches up. The first wave of chaos swept through the gala. Security moved toward the screens, the audience crowded around to see the evidence, reporters scribbling furiously. Vanessa stepped back, realizing she had lost control of the room, the narrative, the story she had tried to own. I remained calm, observing, calculating, waiting. The trap had been sprung. The exposure was public. The first step in reclaiming everything taken from me was complete. Outside, a storm began to roll in, clouds covering the moon, lightning tracing the horizon. Inside, the storm had already begun. Vanessa's empire was unraveling, and the night belonged to the one who had been invisible until this moment, me. The aftermath was a quiet storm. Headlines were already flashing on screens across the city, a tidal wave of evidence, exposure, and outrage. Vanessa Horton had become a public cautionary tale overnight. Every shipment, every forged signature, every manipulated account, all documented, all verified, all undeniable. I sat in the back room of a small safe house, the night outside pressing against the window pane. The city had not yet woken, but the network I had created hummed quietly, sending duplicates of evidence to secure servers, journalists, and legal authorities. Riley was monitoring remotely, confirming that nothing had been intercepted. I poured a cup of coffee and stared at the glowing laptop screen. My reflection was pale, eyes rimmed with the faintest traces of fatigue. The trap had worked perfectly. The first phase of exposure was complete. Yet, satisfaction was fleeting. There was still Ellison, still the architect who had orchestrated the betrayal that had erased me. The first ping came shortly after midnight, a signal I had left embedded in the network to notify me if anyone tampered with the files. Riley's voice came through first, tense but steady. "Hallie, it's spreading faster than we anticipated. The network is live internationally. Every traceable account is compromised. They're moving to contain it, but too late." I leaned back in the chair, letting the hum of the servers settle over me. Vanessa's downfall had been necessary, but she had been a distraction, a lure. The real enemy had always been closer. The files I had decrypted, the encoded messages I had traced, every move pointed to Ellison. My former commander had manipulated both sides, hiding behind Vanessa's empire while keeping me off balance for years. I picked up the photograph from Savannah, the torn image of two girls who once shared laughter under a summer sun. My fingers traced the red-inked line across the paper. The past never forgets. Neither do I. The line felt heavier now, weighted with more than nostalgia. It carried resolve. Ethan arrived quietly, as he had promised. He didn't speak immediately. He just placed another drive beside mine, filled with corroborating evidence, internal communications, and copies of orders that Ellison had signed. The depth of his involvement was staggering. I turned to him, calm, precise. "He planned this from the beginning. Vanessa was only a pawn." Ethan nodded. "I've never seen anything like it. If we move now, you can expose the entire network." "I know." We spent hours cross-referencing shipments, tracing financial flows, confirming contacts. Every piece fit into a picture I had begun to sketch years ago but never expected to complete in the daylight. By the time the sun began to rise, the data was ready, secure, verified, and ready for release. I called Riley. "Release the files on my signal. Make sure they go to authorities, journalists, and global watchdogs." "Hallie, you're sure?" "I've never been more sure." As the first rays of sunlight touched the harbor, the storm outside had passed. Inside, the storm had settled into a quiet, deliberate calm. Vanessa's empire was crumbling. Ellison would soon realize that his reach had been anticipated, and I had reclaimed what had been taken from me, piece by piece. I closed the laptop, letting the screens go dark. The photograph lay beside it, its line of red ink catching the morning light. I breathed slowly, letting the tension seep out. For the first time in years, the world felt manageable again. And yet, a part of me knew the game wasn't over. The past never forgets, but neither do I. I rose, stretched, and walked to the window. Beyond the city, the river flowed steadily, indifferent to human schemes, indifferent to betrayal. I smiled faintly. The tide of truth had come, and I had been its messenger. The first step of resolution was complete. The rest, the reckoning, the closure, and the quiet reclamation of my life would follow. The world doesn't end in chaos. It ends in quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise, filled with everything unsaid, everything done. By the time the second morning came, the storm had burned itself out. News anchors were still dissecting the Gala footage, analysts debating every frame of Vanessa's downfall. Her arrest had been recorded live, handcuffs flashing under the white lights, her face caught between disbelief and fury. Every major network replayed the moment on loop, labeling it the fall of Magnolia. But none of them knew the full truth. Not yet. I sat at a train station 2 towns over, wearing a gray coat that didn't draw attention. My laptop rested on my knees, screen dimmed. Across the glass wall, I could see my reflection blurred against the morning commuters. No one looked twice. That was good. I had learned to live in the spaces between other people's glances. The drive containing the final layer of evidence rested inside my pocket, Ellison's coded orders, his digital signature confirming every crime that had been pinned on me 5 years ago. The irony didn't escape me. I had spent years erasing myself from their world, and now the truth was going to bring me back into it. Riley's message flashed on the encrypted screen: transmission successful. Network collapse confirmed. Ellison is off-grid. I smiled faintly. Off-grid didn't mean gone. Men like Ellison never truly disappeared. They waited, rebuilt, learned from failure. But so did I. I left the station quietly, walking along the street until I reached the harbor. The same river that had once carried shipments for Ghost Viper now shimmered in the cold light. I stopped at the railing and opened the small envelope I'd been carrying since Savannah. Inside, the torn photograph, the one with the red line, had been folded neatly. I held it between my fingers, feeling the paper soften with. Vanessa had once told me that art was about immortality, about leaving pieces of yourself in the world so the world couldn't forget you. I had believed her once. But standing there, I realized art, like truth, wasn't about immortality. It was about memory. The difference was subtle, but it mattered. Immortality demands worship. Memory just asks to be seen. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and metal. I let the photo go. It caught the air, fluttered once, and vanished into the gray water. The ripples erased it within seconds. My phone vibrated once, an incoming transmission from an anonymous source. I hesitated before opening it. The screen filled with static, then a single line of text appeared. "We never left, neither did you." Ellison's phrase. The same words he had spoken the night the Ghost Viper network went dark. But this message wasn't from him. The encryption key was different, cleaner, newer. Someone else was out there, watching, waiting, maybe even rebuilding. I stared at the message for a long time before typing a single reply. Then watch closely. And I hit send. The train whistle echoed behind me, cutting through the air like a memory too sharp to hold. I turned, walking away from the harbor. My reflection moved along the glass of passing shop windows, not the same woman who had vanished years ago, but not someone entirely new either. Somewhere between ghosts and survivors, there's a space for people like me. I boarded the next train out of town, took a seat by the window, and watched the world slide backward. Towns blurred into forests, forests into fog, fog into nothing. As the train picked up speed, I took the last drive from my coat pocket, a copy of everything, every file, every secret, every proof, and slipped it into the metal slot beneath the seat. A safeguard. Insurance. The truth was safer hidden in plain sight. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. A pale gold light touched the landscape, fragile but real. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running. I closed my eyes and whispered to the rhythm of the train wheels, "Ghosts don't haunt forever. Sometimes they just walk away." When I opened them again, the horizon had changed. The storm was behind me. Ahead was only quiet.